Vault-Tec is behind some of the most disturbing experiments in history. Many of the vaults were built to observe their inhabitants during extreme, dangerous, and usually deadly circumstances. Yet, there are dozens of people in the Fallout universe who actually survived their time in a vault. So today, I'm going over who some of these survivors are and how they managed to come out of a vault, at least relatively, unharmed. Control vaults. Any scientific experiment, no matter how evil, needs a control group, and some vault dwellers were lucky enough to be put into these control vaults. Control vaults were built to actually shelter their residents from the radiation and other hazards of the surface until the environmental conditions were suitable for them to return above ground. There are a total of 17 known control vaults across all Fallout games. Some of these vaults were operational for only a short time. Vault 8 was planned to stay sealed for about 10 years. They received the all-clear signal 14 years after the war, and the Vault dwellers left to build Vault City using a Garden of Eden kit. You can visit the survivors of this vault during the events of Fallout 2. Vault 76 opened its doors after 25 years on Reclamation Day, and the Vault dwellers were essential to rebuilding the Appalachian region. Players of Fallout 76 are actually the survivors of this vault. I assume there's not a lot of them left. Some, however, were planned to accommodate their residents long-term, even spanning multiple generations. Vault 3 residents stayed isolated for more than a century, until they were forced to open their doors due to a water leak. They needed to trade with the outside world to continue their survival, but after only a few weeks, the vault was raided by the Fiends. The Vault dwellers technically survived living in Vault 3, but now we can visit the Vault's new residents, the Fiends, during Fallout, New Vegas, the sole survivor. Fallout 4's protagonist, the sole survivor, lasted a long time, frozen before they were released from their cryo chamber and walked out of Vault 111. They survived Vault-Tec's experiment on long-term cryostasis, as well as manipulations from the Institute. The sole survivor and their neighbors from Sanctuary Hills were all signed up for the Vault. Once the bombs fell, they escaped to the Vault, where they were tricked into the cryo chambers and were frozen. The Vault also housed a group of scientists to observe the conditions of the frozen people, as well as a group of security staff to keep things in order. The Vault was supposed to be sealed for at least 6 months, and then, upon receiving an all-clear signal, the scientists and security staff would be free to leave, and Vault-Tec would be monitoring the cryopods remotely. However, once the mandatory isolation period was over, the team at Vault 111 did not receive the all-clear signal. The security staff were adamant about leaving, yet the scientists, and especially the overseer of the Vault, insisted on waiting for the signal. Disagreements between the two groups grew more intense as food supplies were dwindling. Considering the skeletons and lab coats strewn about the Vault once we get out of our pod, it's safe to assume the security staff finally got their way. 150 years later, still frozen in our pod, we witness the infamous scene from the game's opening sequence. The mercenary Kellogg, hired by the Institute, breaks into the Vault to steal our baby, Sean, and kill our spouse. The Institute, in order to create a new generation of synths, needed undamaged human DNA. A baby born before the war, preserved in a cryopod, and safe from radiation, was the perfect candidate. The Institute overrode the power system of Vault 111, shutting down every pod except ours. In case they faced any trouble with Sean's DNA, one of his parents would serve as a suitable backup. So we were frozen again, for another 60 years. Sean, the father, became the leader of the Institute, and in a personal experiment, he released us from our cryopod to see if we would find him. And this is when our journey in Fallout 4 properly began. We survived 210 years, frozen inside a cryopod, and despite the lies of Vault-Tec and manipulations of the Institute, we walked free. No lasting damage, at least not physical ones. Shady Sands settlers. Shady Sands is one of the most influential settlements in the post-war United States. The settlement featured heavily in the first 2 games, and they helped in creating the New California Republic, one of the major factions appearing in Fallout, New Vegas. All of this was possible, even though the original settlers of Shady Sands came from a vault undergoing a complicated social experiment. Vault 15's residents were carefully selected to be of highly diverse backgrounds, and specifically with extremely opposite and conflicting beliefs and ideologies. The vault was planned to stay sealed for 50 years to observe the cohabitation of these individuals in isolation and the possible conflicts that might arise. Vault-Tec had created a volatile environment, watching from a distance for a small trigger to blow everything apart. But to their disappointment, that trigger never happened, at least not to the extent they had hoped for. The vault dwellers got along okay, at least well enough that after 20 years, the main issue inside Vault 15 was overpopulation. The vault was not a utopia by any means, but people with different backgrounds and beliefs kept to themselves as best as they could. Overpopulation worsened living conditions over time, and tensions grew. This ultimately caused some aggression and a schism that made the different neighborhoods isolate themselves even more. By the end, when the vault doors opened, the different groups were happy to leave and go their separate ways, with most surviving the harsh and tense living situations inside the vault. The vault dwellers stripped most of the valuable equipment from the vault, leaving a small group who wanted to stay behind with the bare minimum. The group that stayed in the vault continued their existence for a while, until they were wiped out by an unknown group of raiders. Several other groups founded or joined existing raider gangs, such as Vipers, Jackals, and the Khans. But the last group, the ones who grabbed the vault's Garden of Eden creation kit, left to create Shady Sands, the iconic settlement that survived and grew for more than a century, until its off-screen and controversial fall was hinted at in the Fallout TV series. The Gunner's Vault. We can visit Vault 75 in Boston in Fallout 4. The vault looks like any other abandoned vault now occupied by a mercenary group, but upon reading the terminals and learning the history of the vault, there might be more connections between its original tenants and the powerful Gunners faction. Vault 75 was located under Malden Middle School. It was advertised as a vault safe for children in the event of nuclear war, and to encourage the student families, it offered huge discounts for them to sign up for the vault. But the vault's ultimate purpose was refinement of human genetics. You know, eugenics. The thing that Hitler was a big fan of. Once the bombs fell, the students, their families, and the teachers were accepted into the vault. The vault staff took the children to an auditorium, telling them their parents were going through orientation. Well, that meant all adults were executed, and their bodies were incinerated. Throughout the years, children would go through countless training, tests, and experiments. They were told they were preparing for the Uptop world, a name they gave to the wasteland and would scare the kids with. Children who did not meet the required qualifications until they were 18 would go through a ceremony called graduation. They would think they were ready to go outside, but in reality, they would be killed after graduation. Children who showed remarkable intelligence but lacked the physical qualifications would be recruited to the science team. And finally, the children who showed the most remarkable attributes, both physically and mentally, would be harvested for breeding. The vault was equipped with frozen embryos from before the war for this purpose. This went on for multiple generations, and the last log found inside the vault hints at a revolution by junior test subjects with the help of one of the scientists. That's a risk you'll run into if you spend years breeding and creating super soldiers. The fate of the last group of children is not clear. We know they rebelled and killed the vault's staff. We know they were highly skilled and trained as soldiers. And we also know the Gunners to be one of the most efficient and skilled mercenary factions in the entire post-war United States. It's not too far-fetched to connect these two dots together. The Gunners can be the remnants of the last test subjects from Vault 75 who later reclaimed the vault as their command base. Gary's Vault. Vault 81 is one of the most surreal and crazy vaults that we can visit in Fallout 3. The vault is filled with nothing but hostile creatures and violent clones of a man named Gary. Who is Gary? And what the fuck happened in Vault 81? The experiment and the setup of this vault might be caused by some of the most nonsensical and incompetent Vault-Tec scientists who themselves resided inside the vault. The original purpose of the vault was to observe the effects of lacking or incompetent management in long-term isolation. The vault's original overseer, chosen by Vault-Tec, was terminally ill and expected to pass away 3 years after the vault was sealed. He was tasked with handling most of the managerial tasks or appointing others at his discretion. To make matters worse, The vault's power system was planned to malfunction after 17 years. To stoke the fires even further, the vault was armed with triple the normal amount of weapons and ammunition, and no entertainment. Mind you, Vault-Tec scientists were going to live inside this vault, directly observing the chaos that the lack of management and a reliable power source could cause. But funnily enough, this wild experiment wasn't the ultimate downfall of Vault-81. The geniuses who had set up this experiment were working on a side project in human cloning technology. They kept cloning a man named Gary, but the clones were all extremely violent. They kept the Gary clones in a monitoring room, and they cloned as many as 54 Garys. The 54th Gary injured one of the scientists, and they decided to destroy some of them to make room for more. Based on the state of Vault-81 when we found it, that plan probably didn't go well for the scientists. The Garys took over the vault and were the only survivors of this vault's experiment, at least until we visited them. We don't even know if the original Gary is among them, or what happened to him. The events of this vault were truly insane. The social experiment aspect of Vault-81 was already stupid, considering that the scientists were going to live inside it as well. But adding the cloning aspect took it to new heights, leaving only an army of Garys who somehow continued to live inside the vault after killing everyone else. Vault-81's robotic savior. The events of Vault-81 were one of the few instances of the morality and humanity of Vault-Tec scientists overpowering the evil nature of their supposed experiments. And it likely all happened because of a single Miss Nanny robot. We can visit Vault-81 in Fallout 4, and from a first glance, it looks like a well-protected and operational vault that has thrived for more than 2 centuries. We can meet the residents, explore the vault, and do some quests for them. Eventually, a young boy named Austin is bitten by a mole rat and falls extremely ill. Austin saw another vault dweller, Bobby, access a broken part of a wall in the generator room. This was Bobby's secret drug stash. Austin's curiosity piqued, and he wanted to investigate this hidden part of the vault. This is when he was bitten by a more rabid rat. The vault's overseer asks us for help to see if we can find the mole rat responsible, and possibly help the doctors develop an antidote for Austin. Once we start to explore this hidden section of Vault-81, we discover a whole adjoining vault, hidden from the rest of the vault dwellers. This vault is now void of human life and infested by mole rats. There are rooms with one-way mirrors, allowing observation of the civilian part of Vault-81. Reading through the terminals, the original experiment and fate of the scientists becomes clear. Vault-81 was supposed to research and develop a universal cure through unethical testing on human subjects. The civilian portion of the vault was supposed to operate like a regular shelter, unaware of the science facility and observation mirrors. The scientists would introduce various diseases and conditions through air vents, and test their drugs through water and food systems. There's a reason drug research doesn't work like that in the real world, and that is probably why the original overseer, Dr. Olivet, was skeptical of Vault-Tec's intentions. She wanted to blow the whistle on the unethical human experimentations planned for the Vault before the war, but once she found out Vault-Tec was collaborating with the federal government, she knew she had to take action himself. On the morning of the Great War, when Dr. Olivet was called to begin the experiment, she sabotaged the call list, hoping the rest of the science team would not be notified. Even then, a couple of the science team showed up at the Vault and began their work, hidden from the civilians in Vault-81. The first phase of the experiment was carried out on animal subjects, specifically mole rats. Due to a lack of staff, one of the scientists, Dr. Collins, reprogrammed a Miss Nanny robot with the personality of his favorite scientist, Marie Curie. Curie became more than an assistant to the scientists, helping them with their research, and also reaffirming their moral choices and responsibilities. Before the next phase of the experiment could begin, Dr. Olivet took action. She sabotaged the delivery system to prevent pathogens from infecting the civilians. She also sealed all of the access points to this secret vault, effectively ensuring that no one would ever find out about the original intentions of Vault-81. This effectively meant she and the other 3 scientists were doomed to die inside the vault, but since they had enough food and water to survive the rest of their lives, they decided to just continue their research on animal subjects. The 4 scientists eventually passed due to old age, but Curie continued the research on her own. When we visit the remains of this secret section of the vault, we find the buried remains of the scientists, adorned with flowers and candles, and we find Curie alone, locked in the research lab, awaiting further orders from a Vault-Tec staff member. She had succeeded in completing the research and producing a single dose of the universal cure. She gives us the cure if we allow her to leave the vault, and we can go back to Vault 81 and save Austin with it, or take it for ourselves. But hopefully, the story of Dr. Olivet, the researchers, and Curie is encouraging enough for us to do the right thing. Vault 81 was planned to overtake some of the most unethical and dangerous medical experiments in all of Vault-Tec, and it only failed because of Dr. Olivet's moral choices and actions against both the corporation and the federal government, leading Vault 81 residents to survive despite the unknown fate planned for them. Vault 11 survivor. Vault-Tec has done some fucked up experiments on people, many of which caused direct injury or even killed their victims. But Vault 11 was the grounds for the social experiment with the most casualties, and none of them was caused by Vault-Tec directly. Vault 11 was located in Mojave, and we can visit its empty rat-infested halls in Fallout New Vegas. Reading through the terminals and listening to an audio log will slowly paint a chilling picture of what happened in this vault. After the war, when a group of citizens took shelter in this vault, they were faced with a message on a terminal. Each year, they had to sacrifice one vault dweller. Otherwise, they all would be killed. After a long discussion, the residents decided to choose the sacrifice through a democratic election. They would vote for a new overseer each year, and once the overseer had served their term, they would be executed in the sacrificial chamber. The original overseer appointed by Vault-Tec, who knew of this rule but did not alert anyone beforehand, was chosen as the first sacrifice. Over the years, political parties gained power and influence among the vault dwellers. They would nominate and campaign for the next overseer, who would be killed at the end of their term. The last overseer was Catherine Stone. Before the election, she realized that the most influential voting group, called the Justice Bloc, was planning on nominating her husband. She pleaded with them to change their mind, and they promised they would not nominate Catherine's husband if she had intimate relationships with them. Catherine was coerced into these relations, and desperate to save her husband, she agreed. However, the Justice Bloc nominated her husband anyway. This led to a rage-filled rampage by Catherine, who murdered multiple members of the group. This saved her husband in a way, as the rest of the vault dwellers elected her as the overseer as punishment. During her term, she put a new rule in place as overseer, that going forward, the sacrifices would be chosen at random. This obviously did not sit well with people who had gained safety, power, and influence through the system, and an all-out civil war ensued between the vault dwellers. By the end, only 5 survived the fighting. They decided unanimously that they would rather die than go through selecting a sacrifice again. They entered the sacrificial chamber together and put in the terminal their decision to refuse a sacrifice this year. This is when the depths of Vault-Tec's scumminess came to light. The terminal responded by congratulating them for not killing anyone, and as a reward, the seal to the vault would be lifted so they could come and go as they pleased. No one, not even the original overseer, knew of this. Near the Vault 11's entrance, we can find 4 skeletal remains and an audio log. The 5 survivors walked to the entrance, overburdened with shame and trauma. 4 of them wanted to commit suicide, not being able to live with themselves for what they had done inside the vault over the years, while 1 of them wanted to leave and share the story of what happened here. We hear 4 gunshots, and the audio log ends. The last survivor was unable to convince his fellow vault dwellers, but he also refused to take his own life. We don't know what happened to this survivor once he left the vault, but he survived one of the most devious social experiments conducted by Vault-Tec and lived to tell the tale. If you enjoyed this video and want to see what actually happened inside Vault 94, click the video on screen.